Okay, so we get these shirts, we wear these shirts down to Collision Conference, and I don't know what we were expecting from the t-shirts. I think we thought they were funny. They would make good Instagram photos, but people lost their minds. Like they were like, why would you put that on a shirt? And oh my gosh, like that's great. Like, I mean, people just lost their mind. So much so that we ended up getting an article in Forbes because of this dang t-shirt. These people saw us from an organization called Creative Startups, and they invited us to come pitch in Albuquerque later in 2017. So we go pitch at this competition in Albuquerque. We won, and then they sent us to Copenhagen, Denmark. We pitched again and won in Copenhagen.
The startup investment landscape is changing, and world-class companies are being built outside of Silicon Valley. We find them, talk with them, and discuss the upside of investing in them. Welcome to Upside.
Woo!
Hello. Welcome to the Upside Podcast, first podcast finding upside outside of Silicon Valley. I'm Eric Hornung, and I'm accompanied by my co-host, Mr. Panel Picker himself, Jay Klaus. Jay, how's it going, man?
I am waiting for good news. We have submitted a panel, actually 2 panel ideas for South by Southwest, this upcoming South by Southwest in March of 2019. And I am hopeful that we can bring some perspective from Upside, some perspective that we share on the pod to one of the largest music and interactive festivals in the world.
2 questions. 1, have you been to South by Southwest before?
I've been to South by 3 times, thrice.
So you're going again regardless as if you get this panel or not?
I'm going no matter what. I'm lucky that I am on the South by Southwest pitch competition advisory board. And so I get the opportunity to go every year. And I also get the opportunity to help some founders get in front of the judges at the South by Southwest pitch competition. So that's something I will certainly extend to the founders that are on the show. But if you are a founder and you're interested in being part of the South by Southwest pitch competition, tweet at me, shoot me an email, jay@upside.fm. Happy to get you guys in touch.
Awesome. Well, Jay, I said I had a second question. Is there anything listeners can do to help with the panel picker?
Yes, you can. Thank you for asking, Eric. Listeners of the show, we would love for you to help us with our South by Southwest panel submissions. If you go to upside.fm/SXSW for South by Southwest, you will have a link where you can go and vote on our respective submissions. And that would mean a lot to us. That would help us a ton. So please, if you are inclined, and even if you aren't inclined, please consider being inclined to go to upside.fm/SXSW for South by Southwest. And we would love your support on that.
So we'll have a link to the community voting there. But what are we doing here?
Here on Upside, we are talking to founders outside of Silicon Valley, founders who are making a go of it in what many would consider historically to be a geographical disadvantage. But Eric and I believe that it's a wonderful time to start a company outside of Silicon Valley. And so we're talking to companies every week here on Upside that are doing just that, companies and the founders of those companies.
And we're going to do that using a 3-part structure. The first part, which we're about to dive into now, is our upfront. We talk about the size of the market, competitors, things that we want to think about heading into an interview with the founder. The second part is that interview with the founder. We're going to ask questions about them, their company, and the opportunity. And finally, the third part is a debrief, and we'll talk a little bit more about that when we get there.
Today, we're talking to Ashlee Ammons, the co-founder and COO of Mixtroz. Previously, Ashlee had started her career as an events producer in New York City, working with a pretty impressive group of people, which apparently includes Oprah Winfrey, Leonardo DiCaprio, and Jay-Z, and some large brands like Moët Hennessy and Coca-Cola. Mixtroz is a mobile application that makes meeting at live events easier. They make it easier and more efficient to have actual human connection and conversation with the people that you would traditionally be quote-unquote networking with at live events.
Awesome. So what is your hot take? First take on this company. What do you think?
Hot take. Well, as someone who goes to a lot of events and produces a lot of events, I understand sort of the pain point. It's certainly more of a pain point for introverts at events like this, but as an events producer, you want the attendees of your event to have a positive experience. And so if this helps me as an events producer, who I believe is the customer, really, if I want my attendees to have a good experience and this helps, then I think that could be a win. I do think it creates something I want to get Ashlee's take on is the friction of being at an event, and now I take out my phone to see how I can have a human interaction. I think, I understand it's a social lubricant and it's making that connection. I want to hear what feedback she's gotten from users in terms of using my phone to create a human interaction. A couple pieces from our research here. A company was founded in 2015. It was founded in Nashville, Tennessee, and is currently based in Birmingham, Alabama. In fact, they won the Rise of the Rest pitch competition for Birmingham, which also apparently had more submissions than any other stop on the Rise of the Rest competition. So $100,000 from Steve Case and friends. I'm interested to hear about that from Ashlee as well.
Maybe it's a little bit of bias, but my hot take on the company, I think about this from going to like events with professionals and lawyers and just having everyone come up to you and say, oh, here's my card, here's what I'm doing, blah, 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 leaving and just feeling like that was a complete waste of my time.
Mission accomplished. Told you my name, told you what I'm doing.
Exactly. And those events I stay away from. If there was a way, and I think law firms would be very much on board with this because they charge by their time. So there's a very tangible amount of money attached to an hour of networking. If there was a way to kind of pair them better, and if this is that way, I think it definitely does solve a pain point from both a conference putter honor and a, what did you call that? Sorry.
An event producer? Yeah, I've never seen a business card with conference putter honor as the title.
You know what? I think it sounds pretty good. Or from just organizing low-key networking events across New York City. And that gets us to the market size, which is, I'm not sure. What do you think, Jay?
Well, the closest thing I could find here was from an article in Forbes in which Ashlee said there are 1.8 million conferences in the U.S. per year. So we can kind of back into the market size if we ask Ashlee what the revenue model is like if they sell to a conference.
Right, and that's their total addressable market just selling to conferences. If there's 1.8 million conferences per year, that's a lot of conferences if they take, X percentage, whatever. But there's also the potential to expand to anywhere that humans effectively interact and chaos theory exists. Some areas that I'm a little curious about kind of relates to some of the things we've seen on Facebook, which is this idea that once you like something, you see a lot more of that thing. So if I fill out a survey a certain way, am I only going to see who I want to see? That's a question that I just have a general curiosity about, because some of the most exciting conversations I've ever had aren't with people who are like me. They're with people who are completely different, and I can apply some different types of thinking to my own way, whether that's a musician or whatever,
There was a political scientist, and I would argue a little bit of a social psychologist on a podcast I was listening to last night, who is talking about the impact social media has had on the way we connect with one another. Example he gave was he did jury duty 6 years ago, and between parts of that between parts of that experience, when there would normally be downtime, and 6 years ago he was talking with the people around him, he says now everyone was in their phones and consuming a feed that is perfectly constructed for, we know you want to see this, and the human, call it serendipity of talking to the people around you and hoping to find a meaningful connection, or talking to the point where you do find a meaningful connection, seems to be decreasing, and the willingness for people to go first and bridge that gap between themselves on the subway seems to be widening. So interested to hear the trends that Ashlee is seeing in this space and how Mixtroz long-term can help to bridge that gap.
Awesome. Well, Jay, did you find anything on competitors?
I didn't. I'm not sure that means there's not competitors, but I didn't find any large name competitors to bring up.
And neither did I. I think that the kind of tagline they're going with is LinkedIn, but live, which kind of puts them in a direct competition with LinkedIn. So if I'm a conference putter honor, then I go to LinkedIn. Oh, sorry, event producer. My bad. I forgot we're using the technical term here. Then I go to LinkedIn and I find, maybe there's 20 high-profile clients coming. Okay, how am I going to sit them at tables? Well, I have to go through all their LinkedIn, see, oh, this person went to Marquette and this person went to Northwestern. So, they're from the Midwest, but we're in Florida. So maybe they can make a connection over that. And you're kind of hypothecating all these things. I think that could be pretty helpful. So I don't know who their competition is specifically. Maybe Ashlee will have some more insight into that.
All right. You ready to talk to Ashlee?
Let's do it.
Ashlee, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. I'm excited to be here.
Excited to have you. We'd like to start with the founders. So can you tell us about the history of Ashlee?
I can. I was going to say, I've talked about the history of Ashlee like more than I ever thought I would in life. And so here we go. I am from Cleveland, Ohio, or really a little small area called Lorain, Elyria, that's in northeastern Ohio. Most people don't know where that is, so we just identify with Cleveland because people know where that is. I'm from there. I went to school there, but then when I was on my way to high school, my mom got a new job after getting her master's degree, and she moved our family to Kentucky. And at the time, I was devastated because Ohio, that little bubble, was all I knew. But that was probably one of the most pivotal life moments that I've had, just starting the process early of being open to seeing new things, adjusting to new things. Like, I was very upset when it happened, but realistically, I think that move just gave me so many life skills that I'm still, putting into work today. So we moved to Kentucky. I finished high school there. And then I wanted to go to like USC or like UCLA. Like I was really like, oh, I'm trying to get out of here. I'm like, I had a great family life, great time in high school, but like I was like, I want to do something different. So my mom was not feeling UCLA. She was like, you're 17. She was like, I graduated at 17, and she was like, you're not going to UCLA. She was like, but what we can do is you can go somewhere nearish us. And then after a year, if you are successful, she was like, you can go wherever you want. So I thought I was going to go to Emory in Atlanta, and I wanted to study medicine. At some point, I thought I was going to be an anesthesiologist. That did not happen. And as it turns out, actually, my mom got another move with the job, and they landed back in Northeast Ohio. And so then I started looking at this school called Baldwin Wallace College. It's now a university, so woohoo. But Baldwin Wallace is in Berea, Ohio, which is literally 15 minutes from Cleveland. And after a series of events, that is where I ended up. And of course, I went there for freshman year, loved it, loved the people, loved everything about it. And I stayed the rest of the time. And then I ended up, of course, like 9 miles down the road from where my parents were. But because they were paying for me to be on campus, like they did not play games. They were like, no, you're not doing laundry here. They're like, stay you're behind on campus. I was like, okay, great. So I did get a very like live on campus feel. But it was also great because I was really involved. And so my parents could like come to campus easily and support me on the different things that I was doing. So then I would say the most notable things are I was a very involved undergraduate. Like I went to college and I was like, I'm about to be involved in everything. And I was broadcasting major, but then I was in a sorority on the executive board. I was class president. I was a cheerleader. I wrote for the newspaper. I was a radio DJ. So I did so many different things. And then as I was getting ready to go into my junior year, it was like the semester before my junior year, I was working on this philanthropy project called Dance Marathon. And this was back in 2007. So like there was no like smartphones to be found. Like this was like flip phone land, right? Like 2007. And so they paired me up randomly with a classmate of mine. He was an upperclassman. And when I saw him, I was like, oh God, he's such a nerd. I was like, this is not going to go well. However, after he and I started like walking around together, doing what we were doing, fundraising for Dance Marathon, we had like the most amazing conversation. And I was like, this person is me. I was like, this white nerdy guy like is me. I was like, oh, I love him. His name is Brendan Sorg. And clearly because I still know his first and last name, he had a impactful role in my life. So after Brendan and I went around asking for sponsorship dollars for this Dance Marathon for like 2 hours. So he then said to me, do you need an internship? And I was like, I do need an internship. I'm involved all over here. Like, I should probably start looking at an internship. And he was like, I know this woman. You'd be a great intern for her. So he made this connection, and that connection actually led to me being LeBron James' first intern. So like legit, we had one face-to-face conversation, and then that happened. And that completely just like changed the course of my life. So that is like young Ashlee in college.
I got to know what this nerdy white guy's connection to LeBron was.
Yeah, so it's kind of crazy. So the woman who was at the time, so LeBron has a marketing firm. It's called LRMR, or back then it was called LRMR Marketing. Today it is called LRMR Ventures, and it is based in Akron, Ohio. Back then it was in Cleveland. And the woman that he connected me to at the time was the executive assistant to the CEO. However, she never was really that title. She was more so always like a COO, realistically. And today she is in fact the COO. She is like the juice behind brand LeBron 100%. So he introduced me to her, and she had actually come from the University of Akron. She was like the number 4 dean at the University of Akron. So the amazing thing about that is you have this extraordinary woman who is coming over to brand LeBron, but she has an academic background. So she sees the value in, wow, if I could get college level people to be doing some of these jobs here, what a well-rounded experience it could be for these college students. And so she was 100% bought into that. And so because of that, when I joined LRMR, like I never felt like an intern. Like I was doing jobs at all levels of things. You know what I mean? Like it would be like very minuscule tasks, but then also they gave me some real responsibility. And that's amazing because she saw the value in being able to be a part of a team like that at age 19. Like she knew how impactful that could be for somebody.
When you were growing up, were you always like a overachiever? I mean, it seems like you did a lot. You are like the prototypical like overachiever in that regard. Is that something that started when you were as soon as you can remember, or did it start when you came back from Kentucky, or how'd that all work out?
So this is a crazy thing. So like when I was growing up, like another, I guess, interesting dynamic is, so my mom and my parents got divorced when I was quite young. And so for a hot second, it was my mom and I. So I also think that that's a big deal. I mean, obviously my mom is my business partner today, but when I was young, like there was a chunk of time where it was just like Ashlee rolling with Carrie. Carrie's my mom. And then she married my stepfather, and this is like the early to mid 90s, and my stepfather's white. And so at the time, like that was not happening. It certainly wasn't happening in like Northeast Ohio. So like my parents were like trendsetters in this like blended family situation. And like, you know, I got a whole heap of step siblings, you know, in that, and I have a biracial brother. So like our family was always like what the heck is going on in that house? And so I think because of that, and then I had this challenging part of my childhood where I was really trying to be like my sister. My sister was like this teeny tiny, petite, blonde, blue-eyed, you know, played volleyball and did all the dainty things. Like the cutest boys always wanted to date her. And I just was not that. Like I was awkwardly tall. I was always bigger like than all the other girls. Like I remember my doctor told me, like, I was like, I just want to be smaller. And he was like, you're built like Serena Williams though. And I was like, okay, well, like at the time I was like, oh my God. I was like, are you serious? But now I take that as a huge compliment. But, you know, I struggled actually. Like it took me time to figure out like where I fit. And so I wasn't in the out crowd, but I wasn't in the in crowd. I was like in somewhere in between. And I think with that move to Kentucky, that helped me recognize that you can like write your own story. Like when you go somewhere new, you can write your own story. No one knows who you were before you got there, and you can be whoever you want to be moving into the new story. And so I leaned into that a lot. And I think I gathered a lot of coping skills, but I think I've always been pretty extroverted. And I've always been like, if somebody says I can't do something, I will chase it down until I do it. Like a great example of that is cheerleading. I am not built to be a cheerleader. Like I am 5'8". I'm built like Serena Williams. Like I'm not made to be a cheerleader, but like I made it so. So like I was a varsity cheerleader 4 years in college. Like, you know, and I think like for my family, they were like, where did that come from? Like, you know, like what's going on here? So I've always been just one of those people who is like, whatever I set my mind toward, I'm gonna figure out a way to get it done. And it comes with a lot of hard work on the back end. Like to become a cheerleader, like I was cheering in my bedroom, like in my spare time, like looking in a mirror, looking at my arms, like, making sure I was doing the right thing. So yeah, I mean, I think I've always had that fire in me. And then it just, specifically once I got to college, it just blew up.
How deep into Kentucky did you move? Did you go like Louisville, or were you like in like Bee Spring, Kentucky?
No, so we were in Lexington.
Okay.
So, Lexington is beautiful. University of Kentucky is there. Like when we first got there, like everybody, UK. I was like, what is that? I was like, I don't even know what that is. Cause like I'm coming from I'm like Brutus is what I know. Like that's all I know. Ohio State, that's it. So, UK, especially cause they don't have any professional sports. Like it was a UK crazy, kind of fanatical town. And it was at the time that like Tubby Smith was there. So we were like winning things and whatnot. So that was a little crazy, but Kentucky was amazing because my high school that I went to was like 10 years old. It was brand spanking new. It was beautiful. All of the technologies that they had at the time were available to us for sure. I was a morning announcement person. So like I would go to school like an hour early and then I would be like an anchor on the morning news, so I think that had a lot to do with me, wanting to go into broadcasting later. But that was an amazing move for us because Northeast Ohio, specifically where we were in Lorraine, Elyria, we were like I would say like a middle-class family, like solid middle-class family. We lived in a solid like middle-class neighborhood, a lot of different people. But when my mom got her MBA and we started moving around, it completely changed our life perspective. Like we moved from middle class to upper middle class and then somewhere above that. Because when we moved to Kentucky, like Elyria, Ohio to Kentucky, we went from like $150,000 house to like a $400,000 house. And it was like, holy crap. Like I'll never forget. And I talk about this with my mom, driving up with the realtor to the house in Kentucky. And I was like, oh, we're going to live here? Oh, word? Like, I was like, is this where we are? Like, okay. So, and that's an amazing thing because then immediately at that youngish age, I made the connection between education and changing your life. If you get behind education and continue learning, you can apply that to a career and you can completely change your life circumstance.
There are a lot of different directions I want to go from here. So this is this is hard for me to choose. The path I'm going to go down first is I would like to hear more about what you just said, because your mother is your co-founder with Mixtroz, and we'll get to Mixtroz here in a moment. But can you talk about what your mother was doing at this time while you were going through college and having these experiences with your internships and things?
Yeah. So my mom has always kind of been like a force to be reckoned with. Like she just always has. My mom has always been this spicy, vibrant, Black woman. And I've always looked up to her. Like she's always been a person that I can go to with anything, but she's also like no BS. Like I'll never forget, when I was in college, math is not my jam. And so I was in a math class when I was a freshman. And I remember calling my mom and I was just like talking to her and I was like, oh yeah, school's great. Cheerleading's great. Sorority, awesome, da da da. And I was like, I think I'm about to drop this math class though, because I'm like not feeling it. I was like, it's a bit much. Like, it's really cutting into other things. And like there was a long pause on the phone and she said, okay. She said, well, if you're going to drop that math class, I'll be dropping your tuition. So if I were you, I'd figure it out. And like, that's basically like who my mom is. Like, she's like no games, like with so much love, but she's no games. Like she has expectations, for her children. And she's like, you guys have been given so much. You guys have been able to see so much and you guys need to live to the max of your potential. And, my mom, like I got to see her, like when she was getting her MBA, she was working the night shift at Ford. She was getting her MBA and she had a house full of kids. Like, she had like, it was me, my stepsister, another stepsister who went back and forth. And then my little brother my little brother is 9 years younger than me. So we had like a toddler running around and, she was getting her master's degree. And it's funny because there's one instance I can remember in particular. We were all outside in the yard, like all the neighbors, everybody was outside in the yard. And my mom was like, literally, I was in the house studying for a econ test that I had, for the MBA. And she was like, I was literally like touching the window and crying. Like, I want to be outside so bad, but I cannot. And, my mom has just always been making those kind of, I feel like sacrifices to drive drive things forward. So with that, once my mom got her MBA, my stepdad actually went ahead and retired. So I have always had life flip-flopped. My stepdad has always been the stay-at-home parent, like the get dinner on the table parent. And my mom has always been the parent coming in from work and then, traveling quite extensively for these jobs that she's had. So she grew to be a global HR director. She actually led a HR transformation, human resources transformation for 120,000 employees. So she's no joke.
So you obviously respect your mom. She sounds amazing. And how did you come about to starting a company with her? What's that conversation even look like?
Yeah, exactly. It's where did that come from? So to get there, I have to explain that after I graduated from college, I had always wanted to live in New York. I can show you guys, I have a tattoo of New York on my wrist. I have a tattoo of the New York skyline on my wrist, which I have to say I was quite heated about because I got it. And then 3 months later, I found out I was moving to Nashville and I was heated. Anyway, after I graduated from college, I stayed on with LeBron for about 6 months, but my goal was to get to New York. And then everybody's like, oh, what was in New York? Why did you want to live there? It is directly related to me watching Sex and the City while I was in high school. That is why I wanted to go to New York. It looked amazing. I was like, oh, that's where I need to be. That's the only reason. And so I started interviewing with companies in New York because I didn't want to move to New York without a job and then come back. I didn't want to move there for 3 months and then run out of money and then come back. I wanted to actually move there and be there. So I did 6 months of, I would get an interview and then I would put all my little money together. I was determined to do this by myself without the assistance of my parents. So I would put my money together and I would buy a ticket on like a crazy airline. I can't, AirTran. I would buy my little ticket and fly out of Akron and get to LaGuardia, and I would have this awful suit and I would go to these interviews. And so I had 3 interviews. One was at IMG. One was at, it was IMG, Ralph Lauren, and one was with a company called Strategic Group. And so the first 2, IMG and Ralph Lauren, did not work out for whatever reasons. Today, I'm thank the Lord, those did not work out. But my last one was with this company called Strategic Group. And my interview was I actually dropped the suit for this one. I think I just wore a dress. I was the suit's not working. Let me wear a dress. And it was in a nightclub. I went to a nightclub during the day and I walk in and I remember this sticky. I was walking in and it was just squeak, squeak, stick, stick. I was oh, this is disgusting. I was oh, I don't know that I'm going to be able to work here. But I did those interviews. And by the time I got back to Cleveland, they had called me and offered me the job. So that was amazing. So the job was executive assistant to the CEO. And so what I didn't realize then, what I know now, is being an executive assistant is probably one of the best jobs ever to prepare you for entrepreneurship, because you're responsible for so many different things. You're meticulous, you're following up, you're making sure things are right, just all those skills that you can apply later. So long story short, with Strategic Group, the man that I work for, his name is Noah Tepperberg, one of the best, most amazing bosses I had. But I do describe the experience as Devil Wears Prada, but with a man. But he was super nice, and he and I's personalities got along amazingly. But I literally did everything for him, everything to do with his business life and personal life. And for people who don't get that executive assistant to CEO kind of relationship, I had a line of credit in his name. His house keys were on my house keys. I had access to everything. I managed his drivers, his different homes, all this kind of thing. And then as I grew in that company, I would get to start working on events, and I recognized that I had a knack for events. So in 5 years, I went from executive assistant to director of events over the whole company. And then my last 2 years in New York, I actually transitioned and I worked for Moet Hennessy, managing all their branded activations from $5,000 upwards of a couple $1 million. So my background pivoted from wanting to be an anesthesiologist to broadcasting to event production, and now brand marketing. So that's the setup for where we are. So in about 2014, I went to a conference, and this is the point where I'm living pretty comfortably in New York. I'm I like my life, like my friends, things are going well. And I went to this conference because I wanted to make more connections outside of nightlife and spirits and the industry areas that I was in. I wanted more contact in fashion and beauty. So I go to this conference, and over lunchtime, the event organizer says, go up to someone with the same color dot on their name tag as you. And I was like, that's the networking. I'm like, this is so awkward because it was like all women's conference and the name tag always is on the breast, right? Like it's always on the breast. Like, and so that means you have to go up to some woman, like look at her breast and be like, oh, I'm yellow, you're yellow, let's talk about being yellow. And I was like, no, I'm not doing that. Like specifically, I'm super cool. I live in New York. I'm not doing that. So I did it. And then I had a conversation with my mom about that. And she let me have it because she was like, you paid to go to the conference. She's like, you didn't meet anybody. What a waste of time, money. And literally, it was that one conversation on November 9th, 2014, that let us recognize that there was a problem. There was a problem at events, that when you go to events, what happens next? How do you actually connect with people in a way that makes sense? And that was when we went down this entrepreneurial rabbit hole. So, you know, at that point, I was living in New York City. My mom was living in Nashville, Tennessee.
So this might be a good time to put what is Mixtroz in your own words.
For sure. So Mixtroz is a technology. We are a software that drives event attendees from their phone to face-to-face in real time. And by doing that, we're able to increase engagement and we collect data. So we like to think of ourselves like LinkedIn, but live.
Talk to me about who the customer is for Mixtroz. I think I have an idea, but I'd like to hear it from you.
Yeah. So currently we have 3 entry verticals. So we are in conferences and conventions, and clearly that is a very wide vertical. So we go as small as 25, and then upwards of it could be a couple thousand people at a conference. Then we're in higher education. So we do orientations and Greek life, and we can take classroom sections that are large and make them smaller into project teams. That's actually a use case that we worked on with Georgia Tech. And then the last vertical that we have is business enterprise. And this plays on my mom's HR background. We're living at a time where the unemployment rate is quite low. And so it is important to make sure that your workforce inside your organization feels engaged with one another. They need to feel like a community, because when that happens, productivity goes up and things like absenteeism go down, and it leads to bottom line profitability, basically. So it's higher ed conferences and business enterprise. Those are the ones we play in currently. But as you can imagine, we have a ton of use cases for Mixtroz. Anywhere where 25 or more people are coming together, that is a great, use case opportunity for Mixtroz.
What's the product mix like for those 3 customers right now? Are you 90% in one and then exploring the others, or is it kind of split evenly?
That's a great question. So, a lot of people, investors, they're like, okay, why 3? And I'm like, because we've been selling in our product equally, actually, to the 3 of those. So there hasn't been like a lead vertical established by the market, which is why we continue to dabble across all 3. I do believe we're about to migrate our business to be a software as a service company, which is very exciting. And I do believe like the enterprise vertical, like I see a spark there. So that may be our lead vertical. But again, like as an entrepreneur, I just listen to what the market is telling me.
So you're saying that you're looking at a SaaS model and you guys might be migrating to it. How does Mixtroz currently make money, and how might that change?
Yeah. So we, up until this point, have been operating a technology as a concierge service, basically, because, it's been a lag in funding so that we can continue development and that sort of thing. So today, when someone wants to book a Mixtroz, they contact us, which is, and I say us, my mom or I, and then we work with them to like set up the questions that they're going to ask in app and all these, and all the different customizations and whatnot that we can do. What we're working towards is our customer will be able to go online themselves, kind of like Eventbrite or MailChimp or SurveyMonkey, and they'll be able to set up their own mix themselves. They'll be able to launch their mix themselves, and then they'll be able to pull their data in real time. So this goes from a very high touch business to a very low touch business, which means that we can scale, which is exciting.
Can you talk to me about your team? Obviously, it's your mother and you. Yeah. How does the development on the app work now? How has it worked in the past, and how will it be working in the future?
We literally are a 2-person team. We have been since we started in 2014. In 2014. So we came up with the idea for Mixtroz November 2014. When I came home for the holidays in December, I thought that I was going to be coming home for like family holidays. And actually, my mom and I had like a 10-day think tank. And over the course of that think tank, I remembered that CES, the Consumer Electronics Show, was about to happen in Vegas. And that happens like the first or second week of January. So I had mentioned it to my mom and I said, oh, we should go to this like next year, like 2016, not 2015. And my mom was like, actually, I'm going to go this year. So because I had a full-time job and my mom was at the time taking a sabbatical from work, she went to CES by herself, like this Black lady from Nashville. She like went in cowboy boots. And she happened to sit down at a table where for the one of the lunches or whatever it was, and there were 2 beers there at the table that she went to, and she was like, well, who leaves their beer like just unattended in 2015? Like, who would do that? So she sat down and, you know, just kind of was like watching the room, and she says that she was thinking to herself, like, Mixtroz would be amazing right now because I feel so awkward. She was like, you know, I'm one of a few people of color. I'm one of a few women, specifically in her age demographic. She's like, I'm really, you know, feeling alone with that. And like, I don't know how to connect with people here. She was feeling very fish out of water. And so then shortly after that, 2 older white gentlemen came to the table and they sat with her. And so they ended up having a conversation. And she's like, well, why did you guys pick to come over here? She was like, were you feeling like an age connection or whatever? And they were like, these are our beers, actually. And those 2 gentlemen have been our app developers since 2015. So that's how we met our app developers. And what's interesting about that is we priced out people locally here in Nashville, but it was very cost prohibitive. Like we would go, you know, tell them about Mixtroz, what we were thinking, and they would be like, oh, well, you know, we can start at $30,000 a week for dev. And then we were like, $30,000 a week? We're like, what are you talking about? And, you know, in meeting these gentlemen, they live in El Dorado Hills, California. They're with a dev shop called AppNexio. They have literally been with us since the very beginning, and we just frankly would not be as far as we are without them because they bought into what we were building. They bought into us as entrepreneurs, and clearly that relationship has just strengthened, you know, over time. Like, you know, they see us grinding, they see us hustling, and, you know, they bought in on that. And so we make an excellent team with them. You know, a lot of times when you're raising money or pitching your business or whatever, they'll be like, oh, you don't have an internal CTO? And we're like, we don't just yet, but we're at this competition that y'all are pitching at. So what's your point?
I think it would be fun to kind of turn to the product itself and kind of give the listeners a feel for what that looks like. Jay's our real product guy on the product questions, but can you just kind of give us an overview and maybe we can dig into some of the product questions?
Yeah, I would love that, actually. So I think for me, like one of the best things to do is like explain a use case for Mixtroz. I think that helps people, like it helps it like sink in their heads. So we're going to pretend that the 3 of us are going to a conference today. And let's say that the event wants to use Mixtroz to do their lunchtime seating. That's one of our favorite use cases for Mixtroz. So when we get to the event organizer will say, download and launch Mixtroz. That's how you will get your lunchtime seating. We find that when we sell it into the event organizer this way, it gives them skin in the game because they pay for it regardless of how many downloads we get. Like they give us an estimate of how many people they think should use it, and then that's what they pay, no matter the number of downloads. And because of that, it makes the event host want to be like, use Mixtroz, use Mixtroz, use Mixtroz. So we get buy-in from the event host, which helps our user adoption immensely. So we all go in, we download, and we launch the app. Mixtroz is location-based, so it locks into your phone's latitude and longitude. So if you stayed at the hotel and didn't come to the event, you wouldn't be able to access Mixtroz. You have to be on site at the event to access Mixtroz. So you launch it, it brings up a branded event for you, and then you start your virtual name tag. So your virtual name tag is your name, your email address, and snapping a selfie. The selfie is the funniest thing to watch people do because everyone knows how to take a selfie. People get mad uncomfortable, though, taking a selfie, but the selfie is essential because people look vastly different, we found through beta testing, in what they show you on LinkedIn or Facebook opposed to what's happening in real life that day of the event. So a selfie is just the easiest identifier for us to use. So then after that, you enter a question series, and this is the part that makes Mixtroz unique. So there are 10 questions questions inside of Mixtroz that kind of function as a survey, and it's variable for every mix because every mix wants to know different things about different groups of people. So the event organizer gets to pick these 10 questions, and then you as the attendee answer them. And so between the virtual name tag and answering the questions, it shouldn't take you longer than 2.5 to 3.5 minutes, somewhere in there. And then after that point, you are done, and you can continue on with whatever is next in the event, in the event programming. So if it's to go hear a keynote speaker or whatever it is, you go do that. And then about 10 minutes before lunchtime, everyone at the event simultaneously gets a push notification, and we show you the group that you've been placed in and where you will be meeting that group. So for these purposes, it would be the table that we're sitting at lunch. So you go to the table that matches up with what you saw on your phone, and then you have these people there. And so one important note is we do group networking, so we will never match you one-to-one. One-to-one can be very uncomfortable. Like if y'all don't hit it off, one-to-one is hard to escape from. But if you're in a group of at least 3, that's more comfortable and you can really find your stride. And then once everyone gets to the table, we can take it a step further and give either, a directive, or we can just give you icebreakers to kick off the conversation. And where the magic happens for me as a founder is once people get in these groups and everybody kind of leans into the discomfort of networking for a second, humanity kicks back in, and you see people leaning in and they're touching each other's shoulders, and they're really getting to know one another. Another thing that we always notice is when Mixtroz is activated, the volume in the room goes up exponentially, because instead of people who already know each other just having conversation, people are like, oh my gosh, I'm from there. It gives me the sincerest joy to see people do that.
Do you have data on that? On the volume actually going up? That would be funny.
I was going to say, I feel like it's something I need to measure. That's from our very unscientific, oh wow, look at this happening. And then another thing I'll mention is, while that's great, so what I just described to you is the engagement going up at an event, right? And so when engagement goes up at an event, that's amazing, because when you're a more engaged attendee, it drives you to purchase, donate, continue support, all those things that event organizers want to happen. Increased engagement can do that. And then on the other side of that, those questions that you answered in app, the event host gets access to that data in real time. So basically what happens now on our platform is a visualization of the data comes up. You can see who is grouped with whom, and then how people answer these different questions. So if you have that data available for whomever is speaking in the afternoon after lunch, that's amazing, because they can glance at the data and actually see who's there and what they want to know about. And then, of course, the event organizer gets to keep that data, to do what they want to with it. And the other thing is, Mixtroz does not collect third-party data. We only use the data that the attendee puts in the phone in real time. And that's interesting because my mom and I don't have technology background. So when we heard about third-party data and all the data you could get, we were like, ooh, that's creepy. Let's not do that. So we didn't. And so when all of this Cambridge Analytica madness started, we had already jumped that hurdle, because we came from Mixtroz from a human perspective rather than a technical perspective.
One real quick question on the product front. You mentioned that people get a push notification about who they're being matched with. Yeah. Is that randomized, or do you have some method of matching people?
Oh yeah, so it goes through an algorithm. So we do have a proprietary algorithm that, of course, as we continue to scale, will get more sophisticated. But in addition to that, the event organizer has the option to weight each question positively, negatively, or not at all. So to illustrate that, let's say we were doing a mix for Greek life on a campus. We would say on the first question, make the groups diverse on which sorority or fraternity that you're in, but similar on your major, areas of interest, extracurriculars, etc. So now you have a mix of people from different sororities and fraternities, but they're into the same things, which creates more connection.
Something else that you mentioned that I want to get some clarification on. You said the event organizer, when they engage Mixtroz, is paying on a basis of how many people, I think you said, should download the app. Can you talk about that revenue model a little bit more specifically?
Yes. So currently for Mixtroz, and we're testing pricing on our SaaS platform, but the way that it works currently is each mix costs a minimum of $500. So that $500 gets you the in-app customizations. You're able to ask whatever questions you want, the data on the back end, and your first 35 attendees. After 35 attendees, we price per person on a decreasing scale. So for example, a mix for 100 attendees is $1,280, $1,280. Does that help? You need a little more?
Very helpful.
Okay, good.
What are some of the KPIs that you guys pay attention to?
As far user adoption is a big one for sure. So in the mixes that we've done, because of selling it in this way, and also groupthink, the groupthink phenomenon affects Mixtroz quite positively, because think about it, when you go to a conference, there's like a herd mentality. People do what the majority of people are doing. So as long as you can get like the first adopters to get into the app, then people will start clamoring to get in it as well, because what we actually had to build a feature so that latecomers could be added to groups, because what would happen is people would be in their groups and then somebody would be like, "Ooh, I didn't get in and now I want to get in." And so they would get put in a group, but the group itself wouldn't see that this person had been added. And so then grown people would be like, "I'm sorry, Mark, you're not in our group. So like, have a good day." And we were like, "Oh my gosh, no." So that's like the ugly side of human nature. So we had to make a feature so that latecomers can be added in groups, and then everyone sees the addition to the group, and then they accept them in the group. It's very like Lord of the Flies, the way that worked out. I was like, oh my gosh. I was like, y'all are, very cutthroat. But we do observe 80% or higher user adoption at our events. Extraordinarily high for an event technology.
And that's calculated as downloads divided by estimated, or how's that calculated?
Yeah, downloads by how many people are there, like how many attendees actually showed up.
Okay, so we got user adoption as a KPI. Is there anything else you guys are tracking closely internally?
Well, because we're a two-person team at this point, that's the biggest one to us. And the bigger thing is, for us, having our client have the aha moment is the most amazing part, because what we've recognized, and this is something that we've recognized over doing this for years and also going through accelerators and different things like that, our best sales mechanism for Mixtroz is actually having people use it, because when people use it, we've recognized that there's a natural virality to Mixtroz. So if we activate Mixtroz at a TEDx, for example, at TEDx, all of our customers are at a TEDx, because you have educators, you have employers, and you have people who throw events themselves. And so what happens is they'll experience Mixtroz, and they'll be like, "Oh, I'm going to take this to my chamber, or I'm going to take this to my school," or whatever. So we naturally generate warm leads every time Mixtroz is activated. And so that's a process we know as we continue to scale, we're going to need to have it happening faster and more often to keep this machine going. So our biggest KPI, one of our biggest KPIs, is how many leads, like warm leads, do we get off activating a single mix?
So when you get a warm lead, you get someone in, you said the best sales mechanism is getting people on. What percentage of customers are returning to do this a second, third, fourth, fifth time?
Yes. Well, so you have to keep in mind, like up until this point, basically everything we've done can be classified as beta, because we're not doing this, on a scale technology product. We've not yet seen what Mixtroz does at scale, right? So the fact that we've been able to acquire customers and then they've been able to repeat is amazing. So the way that we've been calculating our repeat customers is anyone who has done a mix, who has rebooked a mix. So not necessarily are the people who haven't rebooked, they're not necessarily out of our funnel. They just haven't rebooked yet. So we have about a 30% rebooking on this beta product, which is amazing. And in fact, Baldwin Wallace, this will be their third year using Mixtroz to do their orientation. And actually, they're our largest mix to date, because it's like 700 freshman students at once, which is something. That is something to see.
Can you talk to me a little bit about the sales funnel, because you're going after enterprise and conferences and higher ed? Those are larger institutions. They generally move a little slower, and maybe the cost to acquire a new customer.
Yeah, well, this is the part that makes Birmingham, and I know we haven't like jumped into Birmingham yet, but like for all those who don't know, I'm a big advocate and lover of Birmingham. And I say that because a lot of the customers of ours who are likely to move over to our SaaS version very quickly, they are coming from the Birmingham market, because what we've discovered in Birmingham as a Southeastern startup, they have really figured out in Birmingham how civic should work with corporate, should work with the tech ecosystem. And they have kind of lowered their barriers to entry for a startup. Like for a startup, I can't wait net 60 or 90 or 120 to get paid. And the enterprises in Birmingham understand that, which has allowed our business to move a lot faster. So, I mean, enterprises that I'm working with there are huge ones like Alabama Power, Regions Bank, BBVA Compass, UAB, which is University of Alabama at Birmingham. So, I mean, these are really big customers who have bought into what we are selling with Mixtroz for sure. They've been able to use the product, they like it, and now it's the process of taking the buzz that we have with them and moving them to SaaS so we can establish reoccurring revenue. Because right now, all the mixes that we've done to date are like one-off. Like you pay to use Mixtroz one-off, and then that's it. Like there's no reoccurrence in it yet. So that's what we're scaling towards.
So I'd like to hear a little bit more about the SaaS pitch. If you're talking to an investor, how do you quantify the market in these verticals and what that means for a SaaS model?
Yeah. You know, we really, again, we look at Mixtroz as the what's next. And so specifically, very recently, it got a lot easier for me to quantify the event technology market, because it's funny, you know, people look at event technology and they're like, oh, that's whimsical. And I'm like, no, it's really not. I was like, there's a ton of money to be made in event technology. So Eventbrite last week filed to IPO. And so now when I'm going into investor meetings, like I lead with that, because we are a natural partner of Eventbrite, because Eventbrite actually has an open API that Mixtroz can integrate into. So that will be a way for people to continue to find us. They'll like book something on Eventbrite, and then these options become available. Like, what else would you like to do at your event? And Mixtroz is kind of a sole source provider there, because we're the only one doing networking in groups in real time. So we're kind of like in our own little category. So as far as quantifying it, you know, a lot of it is what we think, you know, what we think might happen. But like from my mom's corporate background, 25 years as a senior HR leader, she can go into a Regions Bank, for example, and tell them all the reasons why mixing is a great thing. So realistically, when we go into a Regions Bank to sell, we're like, Mixtroz is a tool you should be using for your meeting, your sales training, for your client-facing events. Basically, when you're bringing people together, Mixtroz should be the tool that gets used to make sure that those experiences are optimized. So you're not just throwing money at, you know, having an event for people and then, you know, having bad chicken and bad wine and then having no ROI, like what happened at that event. So with Mixtroz, you're actually able to gather, you're actually able to gather some of the money that you're spending. You know, we're in this stage of events and whatnot where people are moving towards experiential, right? Like we're no longer in the day or age where a sponsor wants to pay all this money to like sponsor an event, for example, and then that just means their logo gets splashed up on a wall. Like that's not impactful for anybody. You know, how can a brand really interact with the people who are at the event? And Mixtroz is a tool that adds that, you know, additional layer. Because something I didn't mention is specifically in that conference and convention vertical, we have in-app advertising in our app, and we did that specifically so that when we're selling into a conference, we can tell them, actually, sell this to your title sponsor because this is an added layer for them. And oh, by the way, they can be present inside the app and grab that intimate brand impression. Allow them to answer or to ask one of the questions in app, and then they can gather the data from that as well. And for brands, because I work for Moet Hennessy, I know that is money.
So talk to me a little bit about the opportunity size here. How big can this get? There's a lot going on. There's multiple verticals. There's advertising. There's a SaaS model. There's all this stuff. Eventbrite's going to probably IPO. I didn't read the filings, but probably for a couple $2 billion. Mm-hmm. So what are you looking at when you say, okay, this is the total addressable market. This is how big Mixtroz can get?
That's such a loaded question. Like, I mean, it's a huge market. Like, if we just think about our 3 entry verticals, and we did the bottom up approach where when we calculate our TAM, we're looking at here's how we price, Here's how many we think we can sell. So like in higher ed, it's like, I'm going to figure out a way to, it's like 600 million. In enterprise, it's like several billion, like in conferences, again, several billion, and our TAM is 4.6 billion. That's what we represent in our deck. And so, for example, when I'm looking at conferences and conventions, I know that there's approximately 1.8 million conferences annually, 225 million attendees at those conferences. And I'm just talking about domestic. We haven't even mentioned the fact that Mixtroz has implications outside of the US because people are meeting everywhere, right? So our total addressable market is quite large. When I talk about enterprise, I'm specifically looking at enterprises that have 500 or more employees. There's about 18,500 of those in the US. So again, vast market potential. But then, I have to, it's a double-edged sword because as an entrepreneur, I have to be very focused on the verticals that we're in today. But like, I haven't even hit up the fact that I think that Mixtroz, and actually our customers think that Mixtroz will be great at weddings, because at a wedding rehearsal dinner, and I have customers coming at me with this now, at a wedding rehearsal dinner, the whole point is for bride and groom to become one, right? Except when you go to a wedding, you have everybody identifying as, I'm with the bride, I'm with the groom, and then that becomes like a line down the middle. So if you do Mixtroz, it's very likely you're going to be able to foster more connection, more community, and your wedding's going to be more fun. On the other side of that, people have reached out to use Mixtroz for funerals, believe it or not, because you have people coming from all ends of the earth to celebrate this person's life, and then they don't know each other. It's like, yes, like, how did we all know Uncle Larry? Like, let's talk about that. This is a great use case for that. And, leisure travel, another great one. We always talk about how when we're on a cruise ship, we never meet our favorite family until the last day. And then on that last day, we spend the most money because we figure out they're a Cavs fan or whatever. And then we're all drinking. We talk about LeBron and the good old days and whatnot. So there's so many different use cases for Mixtroz. That's why we're excited to scale, because even as, we expect once we launch with scale into the market, there will be some competitors who arise. But we believe that the market is large enough to support, a few key players. And I still got a couple tricks up my sleeve. Like, we haven't talked about the fact that I was LeBron's intern, so clearly I have plans down the line for that and whatnot.
So you just touched on competitors. Mm-hmm. What do you see in the way of competition right now?
So there are companies in the, I would say, like the networking engagement space who share our thesis, which that's great, right? Because like the thesis is very strong, which is face-to-face connectivity basically trumps all other connectivity, right? So there are other people in the market who support that, but they're doing it in different ways. And our biggest key differentiator is we connect people in groups. Group networking isn't something I've seen just yet. Most of the other technologies are focused on one-to-one. And then we also have those technologies that pop up at conferences that basically show you every single person who's attending the conference, and then it's up to you to reach out to somebody, right? Like you're able to say, hey, I see that you're here. Can we have, time to meet up? And then you go back and forth in this awful conversation that's like, hey, I can't meet at 2 because I'm going to be in a session. What about 3? And then, after you pick a time, it's like, okay, where would you like to meet? So Mixtroz takes all the guesswork out of that because we're already built into the programming. It's something that's happening. So it's like, get on the boat. It's happening. Enjoy the ride, basically. So that's the way we've kind of differentiated ourselves there. And we think, it's a huge benefit, I feel like, my mom and I coming at Mixtroz from this very unique perspective. Number one, we would be users ourselves. And number two, having expertise in human resources and event production, makes us experts on the human asset within events, the human asset within enterprise, and et cetera. And we've just been able to build our company around that, which, is great. And that's why I think we've been successful. We understand the pitfalls, both in enterprise and the event landscape. And we've been able to kind of go around those.
There's been kind of a strong thread through this interview of you talking about from your personal path, going at things as an outsider. How has that applied to you now in this new phase of your career as a female founder? How has that experience been for you? I would assume there's some challenges, and so I just wanted to hear from your perspective what that's been like.
So there's a name for my mom and I, no joke. Like someone has referred to us as quad outsiders before. So that's Black, female, non-technical tech co-founders. So like I always tell people like, all right, let's start off the conversation there. Like, let's talk about the elephant in the room. I was like, yes, we're two Black ladies with a tech startup. Neither one of us can code. Okay, let's now talk about the business. It has certainly, I mean, in ways, like this is the hardest thing I've ever done in my career. And like my career has always been challenging and it's always been intense. I've never approached any of the jobs I've had as jobs. I've always thought of them like career steps. So I was always 100% dedicated. You know, I was used to working 12, 13, 14, 15-hour days. You know, that was just what I was raised up on. So switching to entrepreneurship in that regard wasn't so hard. But what I wasn't ready for are just all the no's. Like you just hear, you have to go through so many no's, you know, before you start getting to yes at all. And I think what becomes important here is we started this business in Nashville and I ended up moving to Nashville because it made most sense. Like my parents' biggest asset is sitting in Nashville, which is this house I'm sitting in right now. So like it didn't make sense to move my parents to New York. So I moved here and then trying to get through the Nashville ecosystem was hard. Like, I mean, it was hard. Like today in Nashville, we're a known entity. Like today, I am on the board of the Nashville Entrepreneur Center. My mom was on the board of the Nashville Technology Council, but that got done through our blood, sweat, and tears. And we were going to everything. We were making sure people knew our name. But it literally took like a year and a half for us to make any real sort of progress, traction in Nashville. Everything was just very slow. Also, I found in Nashville, you get very accustomed to the Nashville no, which is people saying yes to things, but they actually mean no, which is a waste of my time, right? So that's what made it like quite difficult to scale here. And in fact, when I moved to be on Mixtroz full time in June 2016, our first accelerator was actually in Chattanooga, Tennessee. So my mom and I lived in a dorm together for a summer in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and we completed this accelerator. And we did that because Nashville was not feeling us. They were just like, we can't even wrap our mind around what you two may or may not be doing. And at the same time, we used the resources we had, which was the Google. And we got on the Google, and the Google told us that the best place for a woman to start a business was Chattanooga. And we were like, well, hell, that's like 2 hours down the road. Like, you know, that's doable. So we literally moved our show to Chattanooga. And in doing that, we went through an accelerator. We're able to talk about the business better. And then when we came back to Nashville, they were a bit more receptive. So I continue to say to people, one of the most important things you can do for your business is go where people feel you. Do not stay where people don't feel you. That's silly. There's too much world that you could be in to stay where people aren't feeling what you're doing.
And you're taking that forward, right? You're leaving Nashville. Are you going somewhere that they feel you better?
They sure do. And I'm like so excited to tell you guys about it. And it's necessary for me to it's necessary for me to put it in context. So like give me like 3 minutes to give you context for why Birmingham is happening. So in May 2017, we went to Collision Conference in New Orleans and we exhibited at Collision Conference. So 2 days before we leave Collision Conference, I'm sitting there and we're talking to my mom. We're making sure all our stuff is packed and whatnot. And then I say, hey, we should probably get t-shirts made. Like, we're going to stick out anyway. So, like, let's get t-shirts made, like, not Mixtroz shirts. Like, let's have them say something else. So where we landed was Black female founder fund me. And then on the back of the t-shirt, it said, got seed, like seed funding, like, haha. Okay. So we have these t-shirts made. And it's so funny because like just to set up like where exactly we're living in Nashville, we live next door to a retired 3-star general who like, he's conservative. And so we asked his wife to make us these t-shirts and like, he is like our BFF, but he was like, what do the shirts say? Oh my God. Okay. So we get these shirts, we wear these shirts down to Collision Conference. And I don't know what we were expecting from the t-shirts. I think we thought they were funny. They would make good Instagram photos, but people lost their minds. Like they were like, why would you put that on a shirt? And oh my gosh, like that's great. Like, I mean, people just lost their mind. So much so that we ended up getting an article in Forbes because of this dang t-shirt. these people saw us from an organization called Creative Startups, and they invited us to come pitch in Albuquerque later in 2017. So we go pitch at this competition in Albuquerque. We won, and then they sent us to Copenhagen, Denmark. We pitched again and won in Copenhagen, and, thus validated that Mixtroz is a global thing, which was pretty sweet. But then I would say the most impactful thing that happened is this woman saw us, and she was like, oh, I love this, love what you're doing. She ended up following us on Facebook after that. And in October 2017, she came back to us and said, hey, I've just been made executive director of a program in Birmingham, Alabama. You guys should apply. And we were like, Birmingham? We're like, really? Like, oh, God. And we went ahead and applied for this program. We got in. Upon getting into the program's called Velocity. It's out of Birmingham's Innovation Depot. They invested $50,000 as soon as we got into the program, which was awesome because we were running low on cash at the end of 2017. So we get this cash infusion, and then we also get this grace while we're in the Velocity program to figure out why our machine is working. We knew Mixtroz was working, but we could not verbalize the why. Why. And so we got to do, sprint testing and agile project management to really understand the mechanics of our business. And so that's what we did. So the beginning of 2018, from January to April, we were in this accelerator program. And so we literally got an apartment in Birmingham. We were living in downtown Birmingham, living and working there. Meanwhile, my dad is still in our house in Nashville, trying to keep up with the home base and whatnot. And then while we were in Birmingham, Rise of the Rest happened. So Steve Case's Rise of the Rest competition came through Birmingham, had no idea what Rise of the Rest was not familiar, nothing like that. And then we end up winning the thing. And, we get $100,000 cash investment from that. And now we are about 50% subscribed on a $1 million round of funding, which is insane because this time last year, I was like, oh, snap, what's about to happen with Mixtroz? Because it just was not moving fast enough. And now we're in this place where we're about to close $1 million round. And upon close, my mom and I will be the 37th and 38th Black females to ever close $1 million round of funding. And while that's impressive, that statistic is so sad. Like, why are we in double digits? It's 2018. Like, come on now. But, we're jazzed for where our company is going, and only because of Birmingham and the fact that we were able to make a year and a half worth of progress in about 13 weeks. Birmingham, is that so? So Birmingham, the community has really figured out that they were known for iron, like sauce furnaces is a huge thing there. So they had that industry, and then they went through a banking industry phase, and then the recession hit and the bottom fell out, and so things started looking a little crazy in Birmingham. Like their downtown was deserted and all these different things. And now they're coming up on a renaissance. And so Birmingham for us feels like Nashville 8 years ago. And that's when my parents got to Nashville, when it first started blowing up. And so now we all know where Nashville is today. And we feel like Birmingham is in that similar spot. And they have recognized that tech and diversity in tech and bringing diverse voices to tech is a way that they can grow Birmingham as a city forward. And with us joining them at this point, we have this interesting opportunity to really add a layer to the narrative that's going to be told in Birmingham moving forward. And it's very exciting. And in addition to that, there are a lot of Black and brown young people in Birmingham. And frankly, they need to see Black and brown people doing what they can do so they can relate to that, understand it, and also add to the ecosystem themselves. So we're ecstatic to be able to be a part of what's going on in Birmingham. And lastly, I'll say Birmingham has a mayor. His name is Mayor Randall Woodfin. He is 35 or 36-year-old Black guy. He's an attorney, and he has just brought this vibrant, he's exciting, and he's excited for technology, big advocate of technology. And it's just amazing to see that happening in a city like Birmingham, because, people think Birmingham and they think civil rights, and, it's like they are really weaving their new narrative, and they have really got huge buy-in from everybody on that.
Eric and I are about as close to your traditional insider as we could be, right?
Right.
So my question for you, as we see Rise of the Rest, as we see Arlen with Backstage Capital or our friends at Harlem Capital in New York, From the inside, it seems like things are getting better and the tide's shifting a little bit, but I have no perspective on just how bad things were. So I'd like to hear from you if you think things are getting easier for you as a quad outsider and what that trend line sort of looks like for the future.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's getting better, but let me tell you, it's still hard and it's still kicking my behind every single day. Let me just say that, like, what this road that my mom and I have chosen is not, it's not for the faint of heart, like whatsoever. But what I do know is my mom and I are freaking resilient. And one thing I didn't share with you guys is actually during this journey, my mom was actually diagnosed with breast cancer. So we had a little breast cancer pause/fight in the middle of this journey. My mom, God willing, is cancer free today. But like, I literally watched this woman go to radiation every day, have the surgery, all of this. And like, she would like call me being like going to Mixtroz meetings, and she'd be like, I'm on my way to tanning. That's what she called radiation, which I didn't think was funny at the time. It's funny now, but it wasn't funny then. And she, and I just saw her and I was like, man, I cannot ask for a better co-founder than somebody who gets dealt that hand. And all she's worried about is moving this business forward. She legit went into surgery telling her doctor about Mixtroz because he was talking about a doctor conference. And she was like trying to sell in while she was on the gurney. And I was like, okay, I really need to refocus my mind. So whatever the market is doing, we have just figured out a way to do things different. This whole journey for us has not been by the book. There is no book for this. We have just figured it out. We have hustled ourselves to death and we have figured it out. And I think that there are people in the ecosystem like Arlen, and it's so funny because I just connected with folks at Harlem Capital. There are people like that who have that same mentality. It's like, whatever we're doing, we can't do it the same as anybody else because we're different. Embrace that and figure out what your different path is going to be to get where you're trying to go. I think that's the key to it. We're entering this new phase in entrepreneurship and everything about it is new. And so we need to chart new paths. The hopes that I have is in the trials and tribulations that I have faced here, us going to tech conferences and people walking up to my mother and asking her to go get them a gin and tonic. That happened. People asking me questions in pitch competitions like, oh, how was working for LeBron, instead of asking me about my business, those kind of things. All I can hope is that for the next generation of diverse, colorful founders that are coming behind me, I hope that their road is a little bit more, let me not say easier because this road it's hard, but more direct. Like, I just hope that they're able to get where they're going a little bit faster than I am. And then that means I've done the job, but we're certainly not there yet.
Well, Ashlee, we are running up on time, and I think we could talk to you for another 5 hours, but I want to say thank you for coming on. Where can people find out about you, Mixtroz, your mom? Where's the best place to find you?
Yeah, so we are all over the place. So you can definitely go to mixtroz.com, which is mixtroz.com. You can follow us online at Hello Mixtroz. We are always posting things about just how we're doing what we're doing and all kinds of behind the scenes. My mom is like not a fan, but you can follow us there, and you can actually just reach out to us, hello@mixtroz.com.
Great. Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you.
All right, Eric, we just talked to Ashlee of Mixtroz. What are we about to do here in what may be my favorite segment of the show?
Maybe. I thought you said that it is your favorite segment. Now you're hedging.
Yeah, well, I mean, I hate to say that I don't love talking to the founders more than anything else, but this is where I feel like I really, really drill home some of the thesis of this podcast, which is learning to think.
Yeah, so this is where we learn to think. This is Jay and I kind of putting our thoughts together on the company, the founder, the opportunity, and doing it in a way where we can kind of crystallize our thinking and look back in 6 to 18 months and say, this is what we thought about this opportunity at this time. The deal memo is based on the idea that if we were a venture capital fund or an angel fund, we would have LPs and we would be making decisions on a company one way or another. We would be sending those decisions to our LPs to say, yes, no, here's the upside, here's the downside. And what we're doing here is just a little bit different version of that.
That's right. We're going to riff for about 20 minutes trying to answer 4 questions, whether explicitly talking to them or implicitly talking about them. And those questions are: 1, how committed is this founder? 2, what are the founder's chances of success in this business and in life? 3, what does winning look like in terms of revenue and my return? And 4, why has this founder chosen this business? So, Eric, we usually start by talking about the founder. What was your impression of Ashlee?
Well, it's kind of weird because I feel like I met her mom as well through this interview. Did you feel that?
I totally felt that.
It's weird because it's Ashlee and her mom. They're co-founders. So I guess we can kind of talk a little bit about both of them. We'll focus on Ashlee, but we should definitely mention her mom as we go through these questions. Ashlee is super energetic, super driven. I had a very good feel that Ashlee was going to be the kind of person who would push forward an idea and would get what she wants.
Totally. The phrase Ashlee used was quad outsiders to describe her and Carrie, her mom. And that's something they've been fighting really their whole lives, probably in some form or another, but definitely for the last 4 years with this business. And so I think that creates this resilience and resolve that we saw with Ashlee at times through the interview, which I think is really, really positive. The shadow that I'm most afraid of is the technical ability. I think that the story of Carrie sitting down at a conference and meeting a couple guys who became their lead engineers is a powerful story. It's a good story. It's gotten them to where they are now. As somebody who has built and run a technology company without a technical co-founder, I have told myself since that time I would never do it again. It is so hard and expensive, and not, besides just having somebody on hand who can constantly be working on this as their full focus and making progress as fast as you can, having a technical founder really helps with having somebody aligned with the incentives. They have the same incentives as you do for building something out. And to have a hired gun doing that, even if that hired gun has some equity, if it's not their full-time focus, it's just not optimal. And it's hard to, from an investment side of things, take a bet on something that's not optimal when there are dozens, hundreds, thousands of other companies who have that box checked. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I guess my thoughts on that are, there was a little hint in there that they were looking at hiring a CTO. So to the extent that they've been kind of finding product market fit and developing this idea and finding these 3 verticals that they've talked through and met with people on and sold actual, I think she called them beta pilots. I don't think it's been a big deal through now. The question is really into this next raise. How serious are they about bringing on someone technical, whether that's a CTO or a director of whatever? Because to get from beta to something that is scalable and national and all of those things, I do think you need everything that you just kind of lined up. Doesn't bother me to this point.
You want to move fast. You don't want to pay hourly. You don't want to pay hourly for somebody who just doesn't care about the product as much as you do intrinsically. Like, there's no way that a hired gun can care about it at the same level. So I would agree. I mean, I'm not saying it would be a no from me at this time, but the old saying, what's gotten you here won't get you where you're going. I feel like that's sort of the case for a technology company that doesn't have a full-time, whether it's co-founder level or not, CTO.
Well, they don't have a full-time anything except for 2 founders.
Yeah. But it's apparent to me, hearing about Carrie's background and the way that she's lived her life and the way that Ashlee has been raised, seeing that it's a very powerful founder story to me, and really speaks to the dedication of Carrie and Ashlee, aside from all of the other things that Ashlee told us that were great indicators, how involved she was in college, this amazing experience she had as LeBron's first intern, which was like this fascinating rabbit hole that I had to fight myself from going down, because that was not the reason that we were here.
Yeah, and that's a good thing that you did, because I don't know how relevant outside of the work experience that she got anything related to LeBron James is to this context right now.
Right. So I get the sense that both of them are committed. I think both of them will be successful in life. This business, I think my biggest question just hinges on what can we do to shore up and de-risk the technical challenges moving forward? And I think, that's a pretty simple solution as long as they're open towards it and they're working towards it.
Yeah, committed is an understatement. I can tell you that if I had cancer and was on the operating table, I wouldn't be selling upside to people. I can almost guarantee that.
Well, don't rule it out.
Yeah. Regardless of me, that is super impressive, is that kind of dedication that through breast cancer, and not just that one anecdote, but just in general, it was still something that was so much on the forefront of Carrie's mind, and Carrie's being that this is what they want to do, and they see this as a monstrous opportunity.
The last thing I'll say on the founder front, what I think is a very, very positive thing for being quote unquote quad outsiders, they are owning that and stepping in front of it and being loud about it. This unhidden figures hashtag that Ashlee uses, the shirt that says Black female founder fund me, they are out there in front saying, look at us. And I think for someone who's fighting against the odds, you've got to be vocal and you've got to just keep running, keep going after it and keep getting told no, but until you get to that yes. So that's the last note I'll have there. You ready to talk about market opportunity?
Let's talk a little bit about market opportunity. They did a bottoms-up analysis, which got them to, for their three major verticals, $4.6 billion of total addressable market.
In the US.
In the United States. Does that seem decent size to you? Big, small? Where does that fall?
I think that's big enough. Again, a lot of the times this comes down to fund economics and how big does the market need to be so that an opportunity can return your fund. As an early stage angel or an early stage VC with a fund that's not hundreds of millions of dollars, I think this is big enough. But what I want to talk about, one, I love bottoms up approaches. So check the box, big fan of bottoms up approaches. I don't have a question of whether or not there are enough buyers. My biggest question comes down to the model. And it sounds like they're in a position right now where they're starting to change the model and move from this concierge model to a SaaS model, which I think is very smart and what this needs to do.
And why do you think that's smart?
Well, it needs to be scalable. Concierge models just aren't scalable. As somebody who's put on a ton of events and organized a ton of events for different organizations, some with budgets, some without budgets, the price point, I think, will rule out organizations who would be excited about using this and be good advocates for the product because it's a little high from my perspective as an event organizer. If the minimum cost was $500, we'll say, for a group of 25 people, then I need to know that's how that's going to fit into my budget. For a group that small, usually there's just next to no budget, and you're trying to figure out how do we cover water and soda for this event. She mentioned Eventbrite, which is proving that event software can be super successful in this space, and I totally agree. I think it works super well with Eventbrite in a world where they either partner or integrate and work together. As an event organizer who uses Eventbrite, I have no problem using Eventbrite because Eventbrite is making me money, and it's taking a small percentage of the money that I'm bringing in. As a human, my loss aversion is not kicking in the same way because I'm only paying for what I am making as opposed to paying separate from a revenue or an income stream.
So what do you think this SaaS model is going to look like? I know they're still fleshing it out, and this might be hypothecating a little bit.
I think it'll probably be usage based. If I were to guess, and we should have asked more messages or more questions about that. But if it's going to be self-serve, so if I, as an event organizer, go in and talk about my event, I probably choose a number of attendees, or maybe you don't. Maybe it's based upon how many attendees enter the system, and it charges you based on that. It could be that way. It could be a per event fee. It could be a per month fee. I'm not entirely sure. But as an event organizer, I need to know either one, how this plays into my revenue strategy for the event and how it's going to recoup the cost for me. Or two, in and of itself, I don't know. It's just, through human nature, I worry that people will be hesitant to use it if they don't already have like a fairly large budget to throw at something anyway, which that probably is its own size of that market. Maybe that's 50%, maybe that's 75% of that market. And the concern I'm talking about is this lower 25% of the market who run smaller events and have smaller budgets. For someone who's running a conference, it may not be a concern whatsoever. They may say $500, $1,000, $2,000. That's one person with one booth. That's fine. So that's fine. But a $4.6 billion total addressable market, I want to know what percentage of that are these smaller organizers with small budgets.
Yeah. So she gave us some insight into that, and there are 3 verticals. There was conferences and conventions, which were anywhere from 25 people to thousands of people. There's higher ed, which is either from an organizational and institutional level or Greek life. Most fraternities are in the hundreds plus. And then there's business enterprise. And this one is a little different than the other 2. But that could depend. Is it, your entire sales force is coming in for a national sales meeting? Or is it your product management team, which has engineers and salespeople who are going to meet? Or it's, we're going to take the office out to lunch or dinner or happy hour. That could kind of probably vary. But those were kind of the 3 areas they focus in. So it sounds like, to me, they're focusing on more of these large organizations, which is why the idea of a sales funnel was something I asked a question about in the interview. Because the larger the organization, just general rule of thumb, the larger the organization, the longer the sales funnel. It's very rare that you're going to sell into a very large organization quickly. And that might be why they kind of focus so much on keeping full-time salespeople on, and why they started in 2014 and they're developing this over time, is because these verticals take a little bit more time.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Also playing along with the SaaS model and sales cycles, there are other SaaS models out there where you have more of a freemium approach. Maybe instead of having name, email, and 10 questions for the event organizer, you have name, email, and 1 question for the event organizer, and you can do that for free for any size event. But if you want to collect more information and improve your matches and improve the experience, you pay whatever the fee is to upgrade. I think that becomes something that's easier to onboard people into and get them trying. Because event organizers often are part of larger networks. And so if it works at my Columbus startup weekend, it's going to work at the Denver startup weekend, at the Chicago startup weekend, and we'll share it that way. You wouldn't necessarily need a sales team. And then all of those people who experience Mixtroz through those events, even if it is the freemium model, now they are your distributed sales force going back to their organizations, talking about this experience they had with Mixtroz. And she talked about that being their best sales mechanism.
I think I want to dive a little bit into shadows before we get to kind of what is the upside here for Mixtroz and what we kind of see as the play. Just as a reminder to everyone, shadows are things that could provide a little bit of caution, or they might just be nothing. And it comes from a story that we told back on episode
6, 7?
Back in a previous episode. So my biggest shadow right now is I'm a numbers guy. I would like to understand how utilizing this platform is going to increase user satisfaction. I didn't really hear any of those numbers. I know they're in beta, but that really didn't come out. The idea is solid to me philosophically, but I would have liked to hear, noise volume increases 36%, and we measured that. Or people, when they leave events, are more likely to be engaged, and here's the number that supports that we do based on surveys or based on results or based on people we talk to. And I know that that's just a measuring issue, and it might just be because there's only 2 of them and they're so focused on sales that they're not focused on analytics. But that to me would be so much more helpful in saying, oh, Jay, your startup weekend, people compared to previous years, people got like 80% more validation or 80% more engagement.
It could even be talking to those organizations and saying, okay, you've probably run this event in the past. What was your NPS score? Can we attribute some increase in NPS score from having used Mixtroz at this past event that you did? It did seem like they had good retention, if you want to call it retention, or at least reuse numbers, which is promising. As the number of uses approaches a larger scale, it'll probably revert to some sort of mean that's a little bit more indicative.
What is an NPS score?
Net Promoter Score. After most events, there will be a very simple survey using the Net Promoter Score method that asks people on a scale from 1 to 10, how likely are you to recommend this to a friend or colleague? And you really only count 9s and 10s as promoters. 7s and 8s are average, and 1 through 6 are detractors. People who are going to more than likely damage your event from word of mouth. So it's a kind of a golden standard in terms of virality and whether or not people will spread your product or service by word of mouth. And as an event organizer, you usually follow up the event with some variation of an NPS survey to ask about people's experience.
Well, Jay, what do you see as the upside here?
I'm going to throw a wild card at you. I think the upside here could be a data play. For these organizers who are collecting up to 10 different data points outside of name and email in what is probably extremely niche events, my buddy Tom, who runs GripMat, this company that sells non-slip tool trays for airplanes, essentially airplane mechanics, he's going to all of these extremely niche conferences for car hobbyists, aerospace engineering. Those people have very specific interests, and collecting some of those interests in the survey could probably be very valuable to certain trade organizations. Something they said they don't do intentionally is include third-party data, which I think is a good, if I'm talking as a humanist, could be a good marketing point. I also think it could be kind of a missed opportunity, especially if you're going to augment some of this original data that you can collect in this application. I think, honestly, that some of that, maybe that's part of the SaaS model. You're not paying for use of the tool, you're paying for a breakdown of the data that you collect using the tool that then you can monetize yourself with the meeting attendees. At most of these conferences, you end up scanning a badge. Somebody has their badge for that event. You have a mobile app, you scan the badge, you get a bunch of information about that person. And if they're entering that into the app too, that becomes valuable to people at that conference, I think. I don't know. That's my wild card. Here's where I think a lot of upside could be. Actually, I'll let you go ahead with your upside before I throw in any more thought.
So the thing I like about this space is that the idea is flexible. And what I mean by that is she said that the Mixtroz can be used anywhere where 25 or more people gather. And that's kind of fascinating because it gives you, it's a double-edged sword. It gives you the flexibility to move where the market is biggest, best, and where your idea kind of takes off. So you can kind of beta test in different verticals. So if she wanted to beta test weddings or wanted to beta test funerals, and then all of a sudden you get to a critical mass where you're doing 80% of weddings, well, now you're a wedding company that, can do all this. But on the other side, there can be a lack of focus when something is so flexible. So it's really, really nice that her mom is an enterprise HR manager or was an enterprise HR manager, because that gives them kind of a anchor spot, in my opinion, to move forward with Mixtroz in the enterprise HR play. That can be kind of their cornerstone while they figure out who they really are and what their market is. So I think that that's the upside. The upside is that they have this base that they know that they can pursue. They know that they can speak to the people in it. They know that they can do it well. And maybe there's somewhere else they can go because of this flexible idea, but they have that baseline to grow and develop it.
I'm going to give you a double-sided coin here of opportunity and a shadow.
I think that's what shadows are. That's what shadows are. Oh, no, they're nothing. Sorry, my bad.
What I really liked, again, is this talk about how well this dovetails with a ticketing technology for events. Totally agree. And I think that makes it a good acquisition target for some of these. It also makes the tool something that could be developed by those ticketing softwares potentially as well. And I mean, anytime there's an exit, it's a question of, do we build this ourselves or do we buy it, which is more expensive? And so, again, for that conversation to swing into it's more valuable to buy this, they either have to have a lot of proprietary technology built up or the asset of a user base. And, at this point, Eventbrite has the asset of a user base. People are already going through it. They're buying tickets. You get an email saying, hey, here are your tickets. By the way, download the Eventbrite mobile app. They could, if the technology is proprietary and great, implement it into Eventbrite. But they could also build it technically.
Yeah, of course. There are 3 things that I want to look for in the next 6 to 18 months from Mixtroz. Those are, one, do they solidify some sort of, whether it's loose or exclusive or whatever, partnership with an Eventbrite or with a Ticketmaster or with a meetups.com or something like that? Do they solidify some sort of partnership model where they are the preferred provider of whatever service? I think that would be huge. Obviously, them getting out of beta is huge, but we'll get past that. We'll assume that that's going to happen. So does that partnership happen? The second point actually gets to exactly what you just said, which is their depth of their competitive advantage. Right now, she even said in the space, there are a lot of people with the same thesis as them. They have a proprietary algorithm. And I think it's going to come down to the user experience of using Mixtroz. If people just love that user experience. And that's just my 2 cents. It could be something else. It could be the technology underneath, though I don't think it will be. It could be something else. And then finally, the solidification of what's important to them from a KPI perspective. What right now the only number that she mentioned that was they really think about is their user adoption number, which is downloads divided by total attendees. That to me seems important, yes, but there might be some other things that they can measure or think about that are going to give them more insights and allow them to refine this product to a point that it has a depth of competitive advantage and it has this ability to go to Eventbrite and say, look at how much better events are when people use Mixtroz.
I agree with those things. I feel like I came across as a little damper on this, but it's because I love the idea. I love the team as it stands. And I see this as a little bit of a window opportunity because take these bird scooters that are everywhere, right? I can't believe that technology, which has existed since I think 2006 is what I found, is just now being deployed en masse around these cities. And now it's like an arms race to fund these things and get them in every market between Bird and Lime. Let's say, let's make the bold call of comparing this to Bird. Now that the idea is out there, how can you continue to innovate and beat the competition, whether it's existing competition or potential entrants? And I think it comes from technology. So to me, what I'm looking for is how is their team growing to accommodate their technology needs to innovate? How is their user base growing, especially if the people who interact with Mixtroz become the best salespeople for Mixtroz? You want to start scaling the events you're in as quickly as possible. And I think that's a question that has to marry with their model, whether it's SaaS or a freemium SaaS, whatever they do. I think user acquisition is going to be really important in this so they don't just get squeezed out by someone else who has a complementary technology that says, oh, well, this would be a good feature addition to our product.
All right, Jay. Well, I think we had a fun one here. We had a Clevelander on, though she is, Nashville and going to Birmingham, but I'll still count her as Cleveland. I had a great time on this podcast. How about you?
Same. Ashlee was delightful. I'm glad she took the time. I'm glad we finally got another female founder on here, Eric. A point of focus here for us moving forward.
Well, we got a quad outsider. That's big for us.
That's true. We are very much insiders.
All right, Jay, where can people find more about us?
If you guys have an idea for a guest for our show, or if you have feedback on this episode, we'd love to hear it. Tweet at us at UpsideFM or email us hello@upside.fm. Pretty easy to get a hold of Eric and I if you want to hit us personally. And if you enjoyed the show, please do leave us a review on iTunes. That means a lot for us in bringing on high quality guests to the show. And I almost forgot, Breaker, our preferred podcasting platform. If you guys have thoughts, you can comment directly on this episode on Breaker. And Eric and I are usually in there hanging out to talk with you.
I think Jay meant hit us up, not hit us. If you want to hit us, that's gonna be a little harder.
All right, talk to you guys next week. That's all for this week. Thanks for listening. We'd love to hear your thoughts on today's guest, so shoot us an email at hello@upside.fm or find us on Twitter @UpsideFM. We'll be back here next week at the same time talking to another founder in our quest to find upside outside of Silicon Valley. If you or someone you know would make a good guest for our show, please email us or find us on Twitter and let us know. And if you love our show, please leave us a review on iTunes. That goes a long way in helping us spread the word and continue to help bring high-quality guests to the show. Eric and I decided there were a couple things we wanted to share with you at the end of the podcast, and so here we go. Eric Hornung and Jay Klaus are the founding parties of the Upside podcast. At the time of this recording, we do not own equity or other financial interest in the companies which appear on this show. All opinions expressed by podcast participants are solely their own opinion and do not reflect the opinions of Duff & Phelps LLC and its affiliates, Unreal Collective LLC and its affiliates, or any entity which employ us. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as a basis for investment decisions. We have not considered your specific financial situation nor provided any investment advice on this show. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next week.
Never mind, bro, that can't be matched. I'm lighting it on fire, used to run victory laps, and still I'm not even tired. It's all about the timing, yeah, that's what they say. Well, I'ma keep